Picture this for a moment. A 40-foot chimney standing alone in the middle of a Florida swamp. No factory, no workers, no smoke. Just a silent tower of brick rising above the palmettos. Today it looks like a lonely monument to nothing. But in the mid-1800s, this was the beating heart of a powerful sugar empire. A steam-powered factory that produced enormous wealth from Florida sugarcane. But that wealth came at an unimaginable cost. More than 1,000 enslaved people were forced to build and operate this plantation, working brutal hours in the fields and inside the dangerous machinery of the mill itself. Today we're exploring the Yulee sugar mill ruins to uncover the story behind this place, the ambitious man who built it, the empire that rose here in the swamps of Florida, and how the Civil War brought the entire operation crashing down. So how does a massive industrial plantation end up as a lonely ruin beside a quiet Florida road? To understand that, you have to understand the man who imagined it, David Levy Yulee. Yulee was one of the most influential figures in early Florida history. Brilliant, ambitious, and politically savvy, he helped guide Florida into statehood and became the state's first United States senator, as well as the first person of Jewish heritage to ever serve in the Senate. But politics was only part of his legacy. Yulee was also a railroad pioneer who helped connect Florida's Atlantic and Gulf coasts, opening huge portions of the state to development. Yet his most ambitious project stood right here in the wetlands along the Homosassa River. In 1851, Yulee established a 5,000-acre plantation he named Margarita. His goal was bold for the time: build the most technologically advanced sugar operation in Florida. Massive iron machinery was shipped down from New York, steam engines, cane crushers, and enormous boiling kettles designed to turn raw sugarcane into valuable syrup, molasses, and sugar. What remains today, the towering chimney and scattered stonework, are the skeletal remains of that dream. But for the people forced to build it, that dream would become something much darker. Growing sugarcane in Florida wasn't simple. The land first had to be drained and cleared, fields planted, cane harvested quickly before it spoiled in the heat, and once harvested, the cane had to be processed immediately inside the mill. It was an enormous operation, and it depended entirely on enslaved labor. Yulee owned more than 1,000 enslaved people, with at least 80 living and working here directly at the plantation complex. Their labor powered every part of the system. In the fields, men, women, and children cut thick stalks of sugarcane under the relentless Florida sun, swinging heavy blades through dense vegetation for hours at a time. Once harvested, the cane was hauled here to the mill. Inside the factory, the work became even more dangerous. Massive iron rollers crushed the cane to extract its juice. Machines powerful enough to pull in clothing or limbs without warning. The juice was then boiled in huge kettles over roaring furnaces that turned the mill into an unbearable furnace of heat and steam. Burns, injuries, and exhaustion were constant risks. From that dangerous labor came barrels of sugar, syrup, and molasses that were loaded onto boats along the Homosassa River and shipped to markets across the South. The operation made David Levi Yulee one of the wealthiest men in Florida, but the wealth of this plantation was built entirely on the suffering of the people he enslaved. These ruins are not simply the remains of a factory. They are a reminder of the human cost behind that prosperity. When the Civil War erupted in 1861, the role of this plantation changed almost overnight. Sugar was no longer just a profitable commodity, it became a strategic resource for the Confederacy. David Levi Yulee, a strong supporter of slavery, resigned from the U.S. Senate when Florida seceded and joined the Confederate Congress. His plantation quickly became a valuable supplier for the Southern war effort, but that also made it a target. Union naval forces established a blockade along Florida's coastline, cutting off trade routes and strangling Confederate supply chains. Without the ability to ship goods, the plantation's production slowed and eventually stopped altogether. The machinery fell silent. The furnaces cooled. The once booming industrial center began to collapse under the weight of the war. And then, in 1864, the war arrived here in person. It's amazing how many places like this, places that played real roles in American history, sit quietly along backroads with hardly anyone noticing. If you enjoy exploring these forgotten places with us, let us know down in the comments. In May of 1864, Union gunboats traveled up the Homosassa River on a mission to strike Confederate infrastructure. Their primary target was Yulee's mansion, located nearby on Tiger Tail Island. Union troops landed, raided the plantation stores, and burned the house to the ground. The personal center of Yulee's empire disappeared in a single night. But something even more important happened during that raid. Union forces declared the enslaved people of the plantation free under the Emancipation Proclamation. For hundreds of people who had been forced to labor here, the arrival of those Union boats marked the end of their captivity. Interestingly, the sugar mill itself survived the raid. Located further inland, it likely escaped destruction simply because it was hidden from the raiding party focused on the riverfront. But the damage had already been done. With his home destroyed, the Confederacy collapsing, and the enslaved workforce finally freed, Yulee abandoned the plantation entirely. The mill would never operate again. After the war, David Levi Yulee's fortunes changed dramatically. He was arrested for his role in the Confederacy and imprisoned for 9 months at Fort Pulaski in Georgia. When he was eventually released, he never attempted to rebuild the plantation. Instead, he returned to his railroad ventures and spent the rest of his life working in transportation and development. The Margarita Plantation was left behind. Nature slowly reclaimed the land. Local residents scavenged the abandoned structures for useful materials, wood, copper, bricks, and stone. What remains today is simply what could not easily be carried away. But the story of the people who labored here does not disappear so easily. After emancipation, many formerly enslaved families remained in the region despite facing enormous challenges in the post-war South. In fact, descendants of the people once enslaved on this plantation still live in the Homosassa area today, living connections to this complicated history. The original plantation once covered more than 5,000 acres. Today, highways and neighborhoods divide the land. But this small park preserves the last visible piece of that empire. Standing here today beneath this towering chimney, the story of this place still echoes through the quiet. These ruins represent ambition and innovation, but also exploitation and suffering. They remind us how immense wealth was built on forced labor, and how the Civil War ultimately shattered the system that sustained plantations like this one. The rusted iron machinery and crumbling stone walls are slowly being reclaimed by the Florida wilderness. But the history they represent is still here, and places like this matter, because understanding them helps us understand the complicated and often painful stories that shaped the world we live in today. Thanks for exploring the Yulee sugar mill ruins with us. If you enjoy uncovering forgotten places like this, where history hides just off the side of the road, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss the next stop on the journey. Until then, we'll see you on the next road into forgotten history.